Mishra, and I am the program manager, the acting program manager at the ADA currently. Today, we will be having a really exciting webinar by Miss Elzette Leroux. I'm very excited to see what it's all about, something I'm definitely not familiar with, so definitely interested and excited to learn something new today. And Elzette, thank you very much for joining us and being willing to be a part of the ADA Webinar Wednesday series. It's really great that we have such amazing presenters who are willing to come on and give some of their time and give back to our ADA alumni, as well as anyone new who'd like to come learn something. I'm going to allow you to introduce yourself and tell us more about who you are and a little bit more about your webinar. So thank you so much, Elzette.
Thank you, Amalsha, and thank you, colleagues. You're always what a big privilege to be part of this fantastic ADA organization, and thank you, Amalsha, for this wonderful opportunity to join the ADA Webinar Wednesday colleagues as well. So thank you for this wonderful opportunity. I would like to welcome everybody here today, and I hope that you will enjoy this journey with me as much as I'm going to enjoy it with you. So just some introductions on my side. My name is Elzette Leroux, and I am one of 4 advisors at our Center for Learning Technologies here at Stellenbosch University. And it's just amazing to be part of this wonderful team. One of my colleagues, Margriet, is also in the session today. So thanks for joining, Margriet, for being the wing woman that you are as well. So we've got several portfolios at the center, and my portfolio predominantly is focusing on online learning as such. But I'll explain more how I also see online learning. But as an advisor at the Center for Learning Technologies, those not necessarily familiar with the center at the Stellenbosch University, we predominantly focus on teaching and learning, but also how to combine digital technologies with that teaching and learning. So I think with that in the background, if it's okay with you, Amalsha, then I'll fire away.
Yes, just one housekeeping thing.
Thank you.
Just to note that anyone can ask questions in the chat, and at the end we will direct them to Elzette, and then first let you finish your presentation, and then we'll do the questions. So please feel free to put your questions in the chat, and we'll take note of them. Thank you, Elzette. Looking forward to it.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Amalsha. I think one of the I'll probably just switch off my camera for bandwidth sake as well, but at least now you know there is a person on this side of the camera. It's not artificial intelligence that we're using for this webinar Wednesday today. So, and like Amalsha said, please pop in your questions as we go along, and there will be some time at the end of this webinar to also address those. And feel free, not only questions, but if you have some comments and remarks and inputs, do feel free to share that as well. So it's quite, I think, quite a challenge usually when we do presentations or on research or work that we did at a conference. It's usually just you need to squeeze it in 15 minutes. Now we've got an hour, so now it's about stretching it out again. So let's see how we can stretch this one, but still be meaningful and have our time spent meaningful together. So maybe just before we start, I put a poll in the chat. I don't know how many of you can access that poll or the chat, if that is possible. And so I haven't seen any votes submitted yet, but it's right at the beginning of these questions. And before we start, I'm just curious as to know with our participants here today, how many of you, maybe for those who cannot access the chat at the moment, perhaps for some reason, but how many of you are currently in a teaching role and also making use of online technologies, learning technologies, teaching online, Maybe raise your hand if you can online. If you are in a position to vote, that'll be awesome. If you can cast your votes here. Yeah, let me see. There's 1, 2 hands. Maybe by raise of hand. Yeah, some more hands. Who of you are currently in a teaching role and using or teaching in an online learning environment? Just to get some idea of the room. I see a couple of hands still being raised. Wonderful. It looks like a Mexican wave here. I feel like raising my hands too. All right. So can I assume that those not raising their hands, thank you very much. You are welcome to lower your hands again. Whom of you are perhaps not currently teaching, but plan on or would like to teach, and then especially online, or making use of your learning technologies? Thank you, Margriet. Whom of you would like to teach perhaps and make use of online learning technologies, the digital space to teach in? Okay, just a couple of hands. And yeah, so I believe those of you who have not yet raised their hands, are you just a curious bunch joining the webinar? You are also very welcome. So yeah. All right, so let me just switch off my camera here and just save on some bandwidth. So colleagues, today, let me just navigate here. All right, so basically, looking ahead, where are we heading towards today? In online stackabilities, I will, on our journey, just stop predominantly address 3 big themes. The first big theme, if I can call it like that, will be our context. And our context in this sense is the online learning environment. But I will unpack this as we go along. Another big theme that I'm going to introduce to you is the metaphor I use of a lens. And I'll explain this more in detail later on as well. And the third concept that we're going to work with is the metaphor of that of a compass. All right, so before we get to the context, the lens and the compass, I'm just going to share background with you. How did it come about to develop this lens and the compass? Because it's based, there is some background to it. And then we're just going to journey a bit in the online learning environment. I'm just going to unpack the definition that I use for this specific context, and then going to share with you the lens I developed, and then also the compass that I developed as a framework and a model, and then getting to the stack abilities, and then unpacking the so to speak stack. So if these questions were just to establish whom of you are currently in teaching roles, etc. And now I would like to share a Mentimeter with you. So there are various ways that we can do this. I'm going to open the Mentimeter in the chat as well. And in the chat, if you have access to that, you are more than welcome to type in the code 6820 0554 in there. Another way to access this Mentimeter is also by scanning the QR code with your camera. You're more than welcome to do that. Scan the code with if you've got an iPhone, you just scan it with your camera, you click on the link, and that goes through to Mentimeter. And another way to do it is to type in your web browser, go to www.menti.com, and then it's going to ask you a code. Then you type in the code 68200554. And so there are various ways to access this Mentimeter. And you will probably find the first question there. TPACK is all new to me. And it's a yes or a no answer. So you're more than welcome just to click yes, TPACK is all new to me. If you've got no idea what I'm talking now about, then that will be the yes option to choose from. If you have some idea or heard about it before, then you're more than welcome to press on the no button. So yeah, but if TPACK is all new to you, feel free to select yes if you've heard about it before, but not necessarily call yourself an expert on the topic. You're more than welcome to select no. And if there are some of our participants who are struggling to get to Mentimeter, you're also welcome just to let us know. But yeah, various ways to get there. Just to repeat that again, see we are 14 at the moment participating. We are about 30 in the room, so we're halfway there. But I see the tally is growing, and can also share my screen at the moment with you. You can follow with me as well. So yeah, at the moment we've got 84 saying that TPACK is new to you, and about 16 says no, it's not that new to me. And you're more than welcome to still put your answers in that poll. All right, it looks like from the room we've got 19 who'd like to participate, so wonderful. All right, so about 84% of us in the room but today not familiar with TPACK. So I'm going to go on to the next question, and here we unpack it a little bit more. We've got the next question there. The question is, TPACK and I are unfamiliar, TPACK and I are familiar, or TPACK and I are best friends. Which of those options do you resonates with you? You are either unfamiliar with TPACK, you are familiar with TPACK, or you regard yourself as best friends. So yeah, feel free to also make your selection there. Right, and it appears at the room at the moment, we've got about 82% unfamiliar with TPACK, 18 or 17, give or take a bit. Oh yeah, we getting more on more participants on Mentimeter, also well, very welcome, fantastic. All right, so those of you who, let me just share here if you can see the screen. 87% unfamiliar at the moment with TPACK, and about 13% of the room are familiar, and yeah, that number is growing. So fantastic, thank you, colleagues. Perhaps for those of you who are currently in teaching role, Mentimeter, I find, as you can see, it's a very nice way to basically get a feel of yeah, where your participants, your students, where they are on a specific topic that you are engaging with. All right, so now that we know a lot of the participants in today's webinar are not that familiar with TPACK, that also gives me an idea in how much depth we need to go into this topic. And this is where I start off with the background. So you remember I said we're going to have basically three aspects. We're going to have the context, the online learning environment. I'm going to share with you the lenses that I developed, and then also the compass. But before we get there, some background on the topic. So the stack that I'm going to share with you, which is the compass, was built upon previous work. So the previous work predominantly we developed the stack compass from was that of Mishra and Koehler. And before I get to their work, we need to move a little bit further back to 1987, where we look at Schulman's work, and he developed a framework called the Pedagogical Content Framework. What that meant is Schulman said, as a teacher or educator, we make use predominantly of two fields of knowledge or aspects of knowledge, and that would be the content knowledge that we teach, but also making use of pedagogy. In other words, the method of how teachers teach in theory and in practice. So when I refer to pedagogy, you can just think that is the method of how teachers teach in theory and in practice. So Schulman's work, then after Schulman's work, the phenomena of teachers integrating technology into their pedagogy came to the fore. And this is where Mishra and Koehler's work in 2006 became very much more predominant. So the conceptual framework they developed included not only the content knowledge that Schulman referred to and the pedagogical knowledge that Schulman referred to, but they also added technological knowledge. Now, this framework Mishra and Koehler developed is a result of 5 years of work on a program of research where they focused on teacher professional development and faculty development in specifically higher education. They argued that thoughtful pedagogical uses of technology require the development of a complex, situated form of knowledge that they called technological, pedagogical content knowledge. And that's where the star is. That's the sweet spot. So when you are able to maneuver these fields of knowledge, have sufficient knowledge on the use of technology in conveying your content knowledge in pedagogical way, in other words, the how in theory and practice, then you've hit the sweet spot. And this is what they refer to as TPACK, the TPACK model basically. So they focus not only on what educators need to know to incorporate technology into their teaching, but also how technology should be used. So for very long, from 1987 until basically 2006, 2007, when they developed the TPACK, the knowledge base predominantly situated in content knowledge. In other words, when I was at university, for example, as well, my lecturers would mainly stand in front of the class and then just teach. There was no technology used, and very often it was just a regurgitation of information. And the notion was, me as a student, I'm an empty vessel, and the professor in front of the class is the expert in this field, disciplinary field. I'm sitting in the class, I'm empty, he or she will fill me with the knowledge. And for very long, that was basically how it go about. So basically in my work in the field of academic development, working with lecturers, but also specifically in enrolled in a postgraduate diploma in higher education, specifically with a specific focus on academic development. I came to ask the question, but all good and well, we have a lot of information regarding teacher knowledge. And we now know that teachers in this day and age need to have a lot of knowledge, yes, about their content, their disciplinary field, about how to teach and why we teach in a specific way, pedagogy, and also the use of technology and the incorporation of technology in our teaching and learning every day. But the question more arose, where does the student fit in? And knowledge about our students, where does that fit in? So although Mishra and Koehler's work touched on including knowledge of student thinking and also student learning, I did find more context and more knowledge about our students are lacking. So basically building on this quote from McGlynn in 2005, saying facilitating learning involves understanding who our students are. Different age groups seem to learn differently. Differences in learning based on age is one of many variables, certainly along with learning styles that teaching faculty need to understand in order for those faculty to be effective. Now, I want to argue that it's not only age groups, but it's more than that. So student knowledge, in other words, knowledge about our students and knowledge our students bring into the classroom, is also or also relates to questions: what motivates our students? Who are our students? Yes, what generation are they perhaps? What's their culture? What's their heritage? What are they exposed to previously and also now during university? What opportunities do they have? What opportunities don't they have? Are they working students? Are they full-time students? Are they not? Are they part-time? You can hear there are a lot of contextual questions regarding our students. So it's not just about knowledge about our students and how they learn, but these information and knowledge pertaining to our students need to be incorporated in a model and in a framework because it's part and parcel of everything we do. So this to a certain extent also determines how the other fields of knowledge, content, technology, and pedagogy, how they should be incorporated and applied. So with this background in mind, and within the context even more so now than previously, I shift to the current landscape, or predominantly, which is my focus and our focus for today, and that's the landscape of the online learning environment. Now, if I speak online learning environment, I use a very broad term, basically an umbrella term, and I here also make use of Tony Bates's work in online learning specifically, where I deliberately choose a very broad definition of online learning because it also comes in many different varieties. So when I refer to online learning in this context, it also means learners who will use a computer, a tablet, a smartphone, any other device for their learning. It can also mean that they are studying fully online, or it could be through the internet, access information or communicate with instructor or other learners online. So it's a very broad umbrella term. So basically this image from also Tony Bates, his website Online Learning for Beginners, we can look at it as a spectrum. So yes, online learning is also a mode of delivery. There you can see on the far right hand side, fully online distance learning. But the context for today I use is on the full spectrum. So it can either be blending your teaching and learning, in other words, face-to-face while you're making use of digital learning technologies, or it could be flipping your learning. In other words, students need to prepare work before they come to class, and that happens online with devices, with using technology, etc. It can either be in a hybrid mode of delivery, where that means students learn predominantly online and then have block sessions where they come into face-to-face classes, or it could be fully online. So it's the full spectrum. But when I refer to online learning environment, then I refer to the bigger umbrella term. Now, for a lot of colleagues, not only lecturers, but also students, this online learning environment can feel like the vast ocean. It's so big, you don't even see land. It's just overwhelming. I don't know where to begin. I don't know how to navigate the space. The question arises, okay, great stuff. We've got a Mishra and Koehler model of TPACK, but so what? Where do I begin? How do I approach this vast, big ocean of online learning, so to speak? And that led me to the development of a lens, basically. So the metaphor of a lens I'm using to look onto this online learning environment. I look through this lens onto this ocean. So for instance, you are on the sea, you're on this big ocean. You can't just get into your boat and just, go along as the wind will blow you. You need to be aware, you need to have vision, you need to know where you're heading towards. You need to have vision. What can you see in front of you? Is there perhaps a big table mountain that you're going to steer into? maybe an iceberg or two, or what's lying ahead of you. So that's the lens that we look through, and I'll unpack it just now. And then also I've developed the compass, and basically the compass is the stack model that I'm going to unpack in a while. But basically these two tools we use to navigate this vast ocean of the online learning environment. So I look through this lens where I see where I'm heading towards, but then also I need a compass to show me, okay, do I need to head east, west, south, north? But I can't just follow the compass blindly. I need to look through these lenses to see, okay, great, the compass says I should navigate north, but there's a big iceberg in front of me, or there's a big Table Mountain in front of me. So I need to first head east and then head north again, for example. So yeah, very often you might feel like, oh, I've got my Google Maps and it's in the palm of my hand, and off we go. We just navigate the online learning space. So when we get to the lens first, and we view the landscape, this online learning landscape, that's the context, we view through this lens. This lens consists of basically four different lenses through the one big lens that we look. The first one in viewing this online learning environment context is that of planning. I need to plan if I, for instance, want to move my content, my curriculum online. Say, for instance, if I want to make use of learning technologies online, I need to plan. I need to plan for that. And this is where my curriculum fits in, the big picture curriculum. So I need to be able to plan where am I heading towards. I need to plan how my teaching is going to look like. I need to plan what my assessment is going to look like. I need to plan for this event that's going to take place, basically. The second lens I need to look through is that of design. So after I've planned my curriculum, planned my teaching and learning and content, etc., or aligning my learning outcomes with all these activities online, etc., I need to be able to design this. So there's also not only the planning, but I need to be able to design for learning online in this online learning space. After the design, then comes the implementation. And here I can think of, this is now where it happens in action. The teaching and learning in action. This could be the activities that you make use of online, be that in face-to-face with, like we did now, using quickly Mentimeter as a form of incorporating technology in your teaching. But through this lens, I need to be aware of what am I going to implement in my teaching and learning, in my class, in my teaching. And then in reflection can also refer to my assessment. So I need to be aware of how my assessment's gonna look. What am I going to assess? Am I going to make use of online assessment? And then yet again, I need to plan for that. I need to design for my assessment. I need to bring it into action, and then also have the ability to reflect upon that which I have implemented. So constantly, this is the lens that I'm using. So it's the planning, designing, implementing, and reflecting lens that I'm viewing. Now I'm also using my compass. And why do I need a compass? In navigating the online learning landscape, we need direction in an unfamiliar territory. And this stack model, or the stack compass, basically that I developed, basically gives that direction in this unfamiliar territory. I'll explain just now how it works. But a compass helps us navigate towards and in between our curriculum, our teaching and learning, our assessment in this online learning context. So in using this compass, we can really navigate between all these various components. The compass also gives, or rather say, once I understand how to use it, how to use this stack framework, then a value is added. So there is value and guidance once I know how to use it. And this is also where the academic development fitted in. And then, of course, when I interpret and use the framework, I can use it in my own context. So the idea is also not just to be one-sided specific context, but to have this framework as a compass, as a guidance in each of you as participants' own context and situations that you can use. All right, so in developing the stack, so I've shared with you that I asked the question, what about our students? So in quickly unpack the stack, we incorporated then knowledge about our students, but not only about our students, but also the knowledge which our students bring into this learning environment as the S. So the S stands for student, the T still for technological or technology. The A now stands for andragogy, and andragogy means the methods of adult teaching and learning. And the C is not only referring to content knowledge, but also expanded to curriculum and contextual knowledge. So as a lecturer, but not only a lecturer, also as a student, I need to have some knowledge on how all of these quadrants basically work on its own, but also are interrelated with one another. So it's knowledge about the interrelations, the functioning, and the cooperation between these fields. So in order to effectively plan your curriculum, to effectively design your course content, to practice your teaching and learning, and to evaluate with assessment and reflection, we use this compass, the stack compass. So constantly, when I, for instance, plan my curriculum, I need to be aware of my students. Who are my students? I need to be aware of what content that I am going to present online. I need to have knowledge about the use of technology, but not only for the sake of just using this technology, but in an andragogical sense. In other words, use it in a method that my adult learners can effectively learn. Then again, I need to have knowledge on the information or the knowledge that my students bring into class already. What are my student context? What's my context on the southern point of Africa, for instance? Or if you are different parts of Africa, different parts of the world, what is your context basically that you are using? What's your context that your curriculum is developed in? How can I use technology to effectively teach and assist my student in their learning experience? When I design my content then online, I need to be aware of knowledge of my students. Will this design address also students that are deaf? Will my design also support students who are blind, who cannot necessarily see the content that I produced online in my technology? So how am I going to support my students learning in learning this disciplinary content? And then in my teaching and learning, when all of this is happening, how does it play out? In my assessment, I need to be aware of I need to have knowledge of my students. Yes, of course, what have they learned of the content? That's what I'm going to assess in my assessment. Is it a formative assessment, summative assessment, whole different ball game? But what do I want to assess? How do I want to assess? And am I effectively supporting their learning in this assessment? And this is just an example how we navigate, use this compass to basically navigate through these spaces online in planning, designing, implementing, and reflecting on this online learning environment. So I've used this tool in previous instances as well, and have found that not only for lecturers it's become a very hands-on tool to use, but also for students. Even students became more aware of the knowledge they should have pertaining to the use of technology. And all students become more aware of the knowledge that they gain on how do they learn best. What are the ways? Are they visual learners? Do they learn best when they hear something? Do they learn best when they can move around? And then it becomes also important not only for the students to be aware of this or have the knowledge of this, but also to interrelate and convey this with lecturers. So basically, when we combine the two, the lens and the compass, it can look like something like this. So we view this online learning context, this online learning environment, and constantly when I'm planning, I'm designing, I'm implementing and reflecting, I am constantly aware of these fields of knowledge that are interrelated and working with one another in various ways. So where does the abilities now fit in? So we argue that in using this lens and this compass to view this online learning environment, not only the lecturers, but also our students then become able in navigating this space. So STACK becomes the method of enabling lecturers and also students. So there's a shift that happens from a previously knowledge assumptions where the knowledge domain vests in, say, for instance, the lecturer. Now knowledge shifts also to our students. So it's not only the lecturer that has all the information or the knowledge about this disciplinary field or the use of it, etc., but actually shifts of knowledge take place also to our students. Now another shift that takes place is from relational. In other words, I'm standing in relation to, say, for instance, technology or the use of it, or in relation to my students. In other words, a lecturer on this side and a student on that side, or a student and a student, relational, but to relationship. In other words, there's interaction now. There is reciprocal interaction. There's engagement. There's building trust. There's development that happens. There's a sharing of space not only, but also of knowledge, of experience, of being. There's also a shift in the ability of a student and learning-centered viewpoint, and not only not anymore of a lecturer-centered viewpoint, but really moving the focus to my students and if I am supporting their learning at all. There's also ability happening in knowledge relating to teaching and learning needs and styles. So when incorporating knowledge about my students, the S, and also expanding on content, curriculum, and context, I need to be aware of learning styles and needs that really relate and support my students in the big sense of the word. Then also motivating students to learn and develop critical thinking skills. So in using STACK, we also create the ability to, for students now to learn and develop critical thinking skills. And this method makes it possible. And then also collaborate and co-create. It's also ability in that. And then the ability to become more connected and really open up this online learning environment for components of humanness, because it's not just my student in a relation sense of the word or just numbers and figures, but with this connectedness and awareness and this knowledge now I have pertaining to my students, who they are, I really focus on the human, the being, and not just student as a number and figures. So well, basically at the end now, but I love this quote from Brené Brown, where she refers to teachers that are the guardians of spaces that allow students to breathe and be curious and explore the world and be who they are without suffocation. So the hope and the dream is as well that in using this lens and this compass, being able to really create those spaces where our students can breathe and be curious and explore, even though it might feel like a vast ocean. But in using this lens and the compass, that this vast ocean and you're feeling overwhelmed can become a really safe space where effective learning and growing and being and transformation can really take place. So yeah, just to end it off, I've got another Mentimeter slide for you. So if you are still on that Mentimeter, I move to the next slide. So yeah, I'm just curious to know, now that that you've heard a bit more about STACK and the focus on our student knowledge and also the expansion or moving towards andragogy, adult learning, and also content, context, curriculum, etc. How useful will this model be for you in your teaching and learning and navigating the online learning space? Do you think yeah, it could be absolutely, maybe stackable, or perhaps not at all? So yeah, feel free to put your comments in there in the Mentimeter as we go along. Okay, I see about half and half, 7 and 5. 7 and 6, 7 say yes, absolutely. 6 say maybe stackable. 9 and 6, 9 and 7. So yeah, 50-50. some thinking about it. For some it's still sinking in. I hope you're not sinking too far to the bottom, but stay adrift and stay on top of the water. So yeah, about 12 say absolutely, 8 say maybe. Let me just share this one. You can also see the pie chart there. And yeah, so about 12 and 9. All right. So yeah, thank you, colleagues. I'm a bit, yeah, Marsha,
Yeah,
a little bit quicker.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I definitely learned a lot there. A lot of things that I didn't know, and I'm sure the delegates as well. I just wanted to see if anybody has any questions. You're welcome to raise your hand or put it in the chat or even unmute and ask away. So let's just give people a few moments to maybe ask some questions.
Yeah, and maybe if some of the information, it could be a lot of information, maybe you should just...
For extra explanation maybe, or clarity.
Exactly. Very insightful, thank you. Thank you, Paul. Marianne.
Hi, Elzette. Thank you so much. I think this was a really interesting presentation and beautifully presented as well. So I always try to find, ways of how does it link to the work that I do. So what I want to ask you, when you referred to the landscape, and you had those 5 points on context, plan, design, implement, reflect. So the question I want to ask is, when you engage now with academics, do you provide them with like guidelines or evaluative questions, or what do you give them to consider their context or to help them in terms of their planning and design? So how, in your engagement with academics, do you actually unpack those 5 layers? Because I find them really important, but you have to kind of go through the process to get to the deeper reflection that needs to take place, which then is also where the seed lies for innovative new practice that can emerge from that. So how do you deal with this in the practical sense?
Great question, Marianne. And I think Summer now, while we're on the reflection button, if I reflect back on my practices as well, I mean, in the circle of reflection, there is a lot of theories around reflection that you can also incorporate into this. So you can use, so for instance, make use of Kolb's reflection, or different other theories on how to reflect on something. So when I myself engage, I don't have necessarily a set of worked out questions already that I use as a template. For instance, I use this lens. This lens is basically as a guidance framework for me, but then it depends on, yet again, what that specific context is. So let's say, for instance, in your context in program, but let's say the curriculum office, or say, for instance, we're busy with program renewal, for instance, then in using these lenses, when I look there, the context will be that of program renewal, and say, for instance, in moving online, for an example. Then if I work with the lecturers and we plan, then that will be my context. So in planning, I need to know, okay, it's a program renewal, so I need to plan for what needs to be renewed when moving my learning online. And then I've got several guidelines on, say, for instance, what to look for, what needs to be in place when I'm planning for my curriculum to move online, for instance. But that, yet again, in your offices, say, for instance, you've got specifically regulatory guidelines that you need to adhere to anyway. So that can be brought into from your context at the curriculum office, say, for instance. Then yet again, in design, you, say, for instance, have regulatory framework that you need to adhere to. So in that sense, you incorporate that in when designing your online learning. You can even make use of different frameworks that give you guidance on, like Quality Matters framework, for instance, for quality assurance. You can use that as a tick box. I know some colleagues prefer that because it gives them structure again in their design of online. But very often it will also depend on that specific lecturer's context, the module context, the program context. So it's very contextual yet again. So in using these lenses and framework, I also use the context of the lecturer and the module, the curriculum, etc., and obviously mindful of who the students are and my availability to technology and my skills in teaching and learning, etc. All of that coming together when applying this lens. So I don't know if it sounds a bit up in the air still for you, or give some guidance in that sense. But basically, if I use the lens, it's in broad terms. So there is a lot of detail that could be filled in regarding the specific context of that lecturer and the module and the program and the context that we're working in the moment. If that gives you an answer.
Thank you so much. I think it was, thank you. No, it's really helpful. And then just the last question from me. Do you find that, that academics have difficulty navigating between the different parts of that stack the abilities slide, that slide that you have there? Do you find that they have difficulty navigating between those? Because it's a lot that has to be taken into account. And which of those do you currently find do they have most difficulty with?
Good question again, Marianne. So I have found that once they see the framework here, as it, like for instance on this slide, a lot of pennies drop already. So it's a matter of awareness, raising awareness to start off with. So for a lot of lecturers, the awareness of what I need to be mindful of is already a big shift, a big aha moment. So there are other lecturers who would whom I've experienced to say, oh yes, wonderful, the student component together with this just brings a whole new dimension to it, and now I can really plan for my students and get to understand how they learn, how they engage, or it explains why they're not engaging because of the way I use technology. So it depends yet again on who the lecturer is and what the openness is as well to learning. So I have found in previous times that it's also most difficult is to adapt the content that's previously just been used face-to-face for now online context. Instead of copying, pasting, and then using the learning management system just as a repository, there's a shift in thinking that happens once academics see, oh wait, okay, let's look it through the lens of planning, designing, implementing, and reflecting. And in using the stack through those lenses, it just sort of gives them a step back before just diving in, and that makes it more handleable, yeah, than just finding it difficult. So I think, yeah, yet again, for some lecturers, yet again, it's difficult navigating the technology side. For some, not so. Yeah, so depending. And then for others, yet again, the andragogy or pedagogy, the why we use the technology, that's a shift in thinking. But yet again, once viewed through the lens, it brings that aha moment basically to say, okay, but step back, give one step back, and let's just plan for it first, because before we just dive in and do it. Okay.
Thanks, Elzette.
Thanks, Amalsha.
There are some comments in the chat.
Let's see. Questions? Okay. Was there any question? No. Okay. So I've got a question here.
Yeah.
You know, students, if it's not an advanced levels where the students give enough importance to the trainings, most of them stay connected without really following the training. Something that can be seen in evaluations. Is there a particularity for a total control? Rowende, I don't know if you want to perhaps just expand on that question. Or just
Yes.
open your mic. Particularly for total control. I'm not sure if I understand the question correctly.
Relwende, are you able to unmute and ask your question? Maybe not. Or if you could just clarify in the chat, maybe.
Yeah, I think what I want to know is control in what sense? Control, yeah, for the students control, lecturer control, learning control, technological control. Maybe just understanding that. Okay.
Is there, oh yeah.
Yes.
Oh, with Stack, can you follow all the students?
Yeah, well, so can you follow all the students? I think, you know, that's where the relationship part comes in. So if I use, say for instance, I've used now, just for a simple example, I used Mentimeter as technology to get more information about my students in inverted commas. Say, for instance, if the participants today were to resemble the students, then I would have a good sense of, you know, where my students are pertaining to the content that I'm about to deliver. So if, say, for instance, this group of participants had fair amount of knowledge about TPACK already, then I would have had to adapt my andragogy, my my how and why I teach in a different way. So in that sense, I do believe that planning and designing and thinking about who my students are and planning ahead to find out who my students are or how they engage or what the context is. Say, for instance, if I knew we won't have Teams today, then obviously, if I want to use technology and engage with my students and obtain more knowledge about them or want them to share their knowledge, I would make use of different ways, not necessarily digital technology, but different ways of technology. So, yeah, I think in that sense, with the STACK framework, it sort of gives a sense to follow my students or keep track of my students in that way. I don't know if that answers your question.
Thank you, Elzette.
Good.
Maybe Lawende will comment again.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions from anyone? If you have a question, please raise your hand or unmute.
I wanted to ask LaRue. I've worked with ClassPoint. I see Mentimeter works like ClassPoint. Is it an open access app or do we have to purchase it?
Yeah, so Mentimeter at this point in time allows for 3 questions that you can access free. And then you can even build your slides in Mentimeter if you want to. So they have various options on the free option that you can access. I mostly use it is like today. I would have a PowerPoint presentation, my PowerPoint separately, and then just use like the questions or the polling or whatever in Mentimeter. Now it is nice that now recently they've also incorporated it into Teams, so you can, already embed it into Teams. Yeah, and not necessarily have to go outside to use it. But I found it quite user-friendly. Yeah, and sometimes it's just about, giving it a go.
Thank you. I'll give it a go. I've used
Awesome.
ClassPoint. It works same, but I
Okay.
think it also works exactly like Mentimeter, although it has quite some limitations as well. But I loved this.
Great. I'm glad. Yeah, and like you see, there are even more options that I didn't even use because you can only use the 3 question slides. But yeah, they've got quite a number of, and unfortunately, yeah, with COVID times, it gave a lot of people more exposure to, but I also found that some of the platforms like Kahoot and Mentimeter, and there are a couple of others who now building more restrictions. Yeah, than they previously did. But yeah, we can still use some of it for free. Thank you, Jane.
Thanks, Elzette. Any more questions? We can take another one. If not, we can wrap up.
I'm also open for any critique. Yeah, and if you feel no, this is not stackable. I don't see room for this. Do feel free to share as well. Yeah, always here to learn too and think critically with colleagues. So do feel free to share also those critiques. Always welcome.
I think, LaRue, I find STACK. Oh, sorry, I didn't raise up my hand.
Yeah, no worries.
I find STACK quite helpful. I'm actually doing staff development on e-learning here at PACK University in Nairobi. I am an alumni of Stellenbosch University. I did both my honors and masters and PhD at Stellenbosch. So I do academic development here on e-learning. And I truly find it's simple, but I think it's very easy to navigate.
Awesome. Thank you, Jane.
So
Thanks for that.
I think it's really a good one. I've been using the COI, the Community of Inquiry, but I think I really like this too.
Fantastic. I'm glad. Thank you. There was a hand raised, but now dropped again. Paul, yes.
Paul.
Go ahead.
Yes, Paul, you can go ahead. You can ask your question.
All right, good afternoon.
Hello,
Coming
welcome.
Yes, so just a quick one. I just curious to know, how does this approach assist? I've just came recently to learn that when you are having online learning or teaching, maximum concentration is 10 minutes for the learner. So in between there, you have to kind of awaken the class or the participants.
Yeah.
And I like the provision you've put in here to see to it that you include Mentimeter and other apps such that you keep us on our toes to kind of to check in. Is this all the planning in this approach? And I've seen in some cases, like in conferences, they use what they call run of show, especially in the America, in order for you to kind of plan the session and which app are you using and at what point are you going to check in to ensure that all learners are following. So I just wanted you to make a comment on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. That is a beautiful example, actually, of stack in practice. So I'm going to stack on your comment now. So when you are aware of your student knowledge, your students' concentration span that goes for about 30 minutes max. Indeed, so research shows that Generation Z, the current generation in university at the moment, they prefer immediate gratification. Concentration span is not very long, so they want to be kept engaged. So now, because I know this about my students, well, because of the literature, so for instance, there's also a question to raise if that's actually what my cohort of students are really reflecting. So yet again, where the C comes in, the CK. But yeah, if I'm planning my content on that presumption, then that's what I need to plan for. So if I need to plan for my teaching and learning and my design to have ability or the flexibility in using technology to keep my students awake. The A can become awake then. But keep them engaged, to keep them actively engaged, and that's where the pedagogy side comes in again with the content and with the learning. So that's actually a great example of how to use it. So there's also, when you go then through that reflection, like referring to Marianne's question about the practical side of it. So if I, as a lecturer, say, for instance, engage with my students, then there's also reflection in action. So while I'm teaching, I'm busy reflecting. I'm seeing, oh my goodness, now I'm losing my students now. Constantly aware of my student knowledge. I'm losing my students now. I'm quickly reflecting on the spot, reflection in action. So to adapt my andragogy, adapt my approach, and then I bring in, say, for instance, another activity to keep them engaged. But yeah, that's basically an example of how Stack and Lens work together in action. Thanks for that, Paul.
Excellent. So just a quick one again. I just wanted to ask for your experience with, you find that most of the teachers or the facilitators may not be very familiar with these systems.
Yeah.
So how has been your experience in South Africa?
Yeah.
Maybe this is a Ugandan context.
Well, no, Paul, yeah, I think it's yet again depends on context. So on specific context. So there are different colleagues of mine, different institutions, different contexts who also doesn't have a lot of bandwidth, Wi-Fi available, so that'll influence your accessibility to the use of technology. Then you should plan for more asynchronous, in other words, not on the spot, interactive at the same time, place and space, learning that takes place, but different way, different context. So yeah, the lecturers, it varies from the ability in learning more about technology and the speed of learning of that. It really depends on who the people are, yeah, and what the context is basically. And yeah, and it's not, yeah, it's not just Uganda that have a lot of those obstacles or challenges. It's the challenges are universal, but so are some of the opportunities too. And I think, yeah, if my experience as well, if you have lecturers who are keen on learning themselves, then they are the faster learners. If it also depends on your teaching philosophy, I think. If you have a passion and a heart for your students and to really make their learning experience a better experience, then you as a lecturer will like, you know, come to the party and be open to learn. And doesn't matter how long it takes to learn, just as long as you step up and you make yourself open for learning and participating, etc. And having the courage to sometimes, you know, like Jane said, have the courage and try something new, and try that. So Jane, unfortunately not yet any published work on Stack, but I'm working on that. Yeah. Paul, I hope you answered that question.
There's a comment.
Yeah.
And Paul
Thank
says
you.
thank you very much.
Okay, fantastic. So yeah, I've got thank you for sharing, Amalsha, the resources, and then thank you, Melissa, also for your comment. The student profile for a specific program module is essential in identifying the how we teach, absolutely, and create engagement opportunities. 100%. I can't just go blanket approach and say, oh yeah, the students from 20 years back, the same as now. Yeah, we need to be open to adapt our teaching learning practices, also to to assist our students in better learning and their learning experience, and to also, I mean, it's reciprocal, so I can learn from my students as well. It's not just a one-way street, and that's where that relationship comes in.
Thank you, Elzette. Yeah, I think if there are no more questions, we can wrap up. Are you happy to do that, Elzette?
Yo, happy to wrap. Happy to wrap up.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Amalsha, and thank you, colleagues, and thank you for also creating a gracious space from your side, for to be able to share this with you, and thank you for your receiving of this. And if you perhaps think of something or input or question or whatever, you are more than welcome to keep in contact. Also going to pop in my email address here, and you can also see me on LinkedIn and connect in that sense as well. But thank you yet again, Amalsha, for the opportunity. It's been really wonderful.
Yes, thank you so much, Elzette. This has been very insightful, something very new for me and I think the delegates. And as you can see from the interest and the questions on publishing on Stack, I think you can see there's definitely an audience for this. So I hope you get this out there soon and we can share it with the participants, yes? But thank you again for your time, the participants as well. Thank you so much for your time and your questions and engaging with us. We love bringing these webinar Wednesdays to you, and yeah, thank you so much for joining us, and we hope to see you again next month for the next webinar.
Thank you, Amalsha, and thank you for the great work, ADA.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye, colleagues. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Goodbye.